not the coincidences that get me, it's the lies. It's the out and out lies. They are hiding something. There's more to what... No, not you, not today. Get out. I don't have time for you right now. This. That's the missing piece. Hey, what are you even doing here? Shadowlands comes out tomorrow. Arena isn't even available for 2... You know what? It doesn't even matter. Because I found something far bigger than Shadowlands, bigger than me, and certainly bigger than you. So, goodbye. You aren't going to leave, are you? If I give you what you want, will you leave me alone? Crowd control is a blanket term for impeding an enemy. It is the ability to slow, stun, or incapacitate your opponent. Through proper use of CC, a rogue with no gear equipped could massacre a Grand Marshal, because if you deny your opponent the ability to play, nothing else matters. Crowd control has become essential for survival, and it's a pretty big deal in World of Warcraft as well. So in this episode of WoW Arena Fundamentals, we discuss the topic of crowd control. Chapter 1. The Basics. Here we have a list of most crowd control. The first thing you'll notice is that, oh my god, this took so long to put together. Like, let's take a second and indulge in some commodity de-fetishization and see just how much work went into making this one fucking diagram. Like, just look at this. Anyway, we're going to be doing some generalizations here, but remember that each of these spells have their own nuances. Some disorients are broken by any damage, some break after a certain amount of damage. One provides full invulnerability. Crowd control effects that never break on damage are generally limited to stuns, with a few key outliers like Mortal Coil. Crowd control effects are kept in check through diminishing returns. As we discussed before, each subsequent application of a category of CC will have a reduced potency. Crowd control diminishes at a rate of 100, 50, 25, and then 0%, or immunity. So the first application will have its full expected duration, its subsequent application will be for half that, and the third and final application will be for a quarter of the standard length. Again, this is based not on the spell, but on the category. If a Demon Hunter were to use Fel Eruption and then Chaos Nova, that Chaos Nova would have a reduced duration because they're both stuns. The window for diminishing returns is 18 seconds following the removal of the debuff. If you were to polymorph a hunter and they were to sit the full duration, it would be 26 seconds from landing the polymorph till your next full polymorph. However, if the hunter were to trinket the poly 2 seconds in, you'll be able to cast a second full poly after only 20 seconds. As we covered in the very basic discussion of diminishing returns in the beginner's guide, diminished CC is not inherently bad, it's the context. Stringing CC together is hugely effective, so if you can land one polymorph, the goal is always to follow it up with 2 more. The DR begins when the effect is removed, so a triple poly is going to push back the next full polymorph by 6 seconds more than a single polymorph. But because the player will have spent those 6 seconds as a sheep, you've done absolutely no harm. You've found 6 more seconds of crowd control. Whereas if you were to cast a full polymorph once for its full duration, wait 10 seconds, and then polymorph again for half its value, you've put 32 seconds between full duration polymorphs in order to find 4 seconds of CC, and that is disastrously bad value. So careless use of crowd control can have a huge impact on your odds of success in Arena because the punishment is so disproportionate. For a class like Warrior with 1 stun, 1 disarm, and 1 fear, it's easy to think that DRs aren't a concern for you. But Arena is a team-based game. You will not be the only one applying crowd control to the enemy, so you are essentially sharing the DR slots with your teammates. Your decisions dictate what your allies can do. This means that there is a huge advantage to compositions that are able to diversify their CC toolkit. Take like Mage, Shaman for instance. Both their signature CCs, Hex and Polymorph, are on the Incapacitate DR, so they're going to penalise each other. But if you were to replace the Shaman with a Resto Druid, their signature CC, Cyclone, is classed as a disorient. By freeing up the Mage's category of CC and utilising an additional category, Mage Druid can land more CC more easily than the Shaman variant. This doesn't mean that it is an objectively better comp or that Mage Shaman can't succeed, but the synergy of a composition's CC should be your first consideration. What CC do you have access to, how do they interact, and what can you do with them? Because those are interesting questions. Chapter 2, what CC do you have access to, how do they interact, and what can you do with them? Let's say you were to do a thing, and that thing had no perceptible impact whatsoever. Would it be fair to say that any resources you invested into doing that thing were wasted? Like who say, for example, investing hundreds of dollars into an elaborate costume for a video they don't want fucking watched. Your crowd control spells and the DRs they trigger are valuable, so they should have an impact on the game. Crowd control is the key component of basically any setup. As we've covered before, a setup is a structured play that aims to best utilize your toolkit. It is stunning a target before using your cooldowns so that they can't get away. In order to effectively demonstrate the power of crowd control, we're going to start with a single spell and build an entire strategy around it. Let me introduce you to Freezing Trap. The Ice Cube's a metaphor. As Schrodinger's CC, Freezing Trap is simultaneously incredibly powerful and absolute garbage. Hunters love it and hunters hate it. Freezing Trap is simple. You throw a trap on the ground, and if the enemy stands in it, the trap triggers and they are incapacitated for 8 seconds. Today the trap has no arming time, but the trap can be thrown from range with travel time. At close range, it is basically instant. At a distance, it can take several seconds to reach. Because it is a magic debuff that breaks on damage, the base form of Freezing Trap should be used offensively to shut out healers. Freezing Trap is so powerful because at 8 seconds of crowd control and a 30-second cooldown, it has quite a high uptime. If the target were to sit the entire duration of the crowd control, there would be only 4 seconds between the DR ending and the next available trap. But Freezing Trap is weakened by the fact that it is heavily susceptible to counterplay. Whether you are throwing it from a distance or running up to your target to drop it at their feet, it's clear what you are doing. This gives the enemy numerous ways of avoiding it, from simply running away to one of these spells to stacking on teammates. There's a lot of potential options. As a result, it can be a real hassle to land, so the easiest, most reliable way to land a Freezing Trap is to follow on for some other CC. But it's you. From this one spell, 8 seconds of crowd control and a 30-second cooldown, let's build an entire strategy. Here is a timeline of the game from beginning to end. The best value of Freezing Trap would be to try to use it as often as possible. For simplicity's sake, let's say the first trap is landed at the 30-second mark, and every 30 seconds afterward when reliable. Now we need to consider the spec of the hunter, because each has a different toolkit. Let's say we're playing with a Beast Mastery hunter, so we also have access to Intimidation, a stun on a 1-minute cooldown. That will allow the hunter to confidently land 1 in every 2 possible traps, and that's no good, so the hunter needs to turn to their teammates for support. There are numerous classes that can fill this role, but because we're basic bitches, let's go with a Retribution Paladin in that second DPS slot. Ret and Hunter are a classic combination, and Hammer of Justice is a key element of that. On a 1-minute cooldown, Hammer of Justice slots perfectly into that gap to enable those even-numbered traps. So not only does this give us 13 to 14 seconds of CC every 30 seconds, but it is the foundation for us to continue building our strategy. Let's complete our 3v3 team and add a Discipline Priest. They can have Psychic Scream on a 30-second cooldown. Psychic Scream is incredibly powerful, but its weakness is that the priest needs to be close to the target. Like hunters, it is incredibly telegraphed and can compromise the priest's positioning. But let's say hypothetically that the target is being locked down for say 13 or 14 seconds. Suddenly the idea of landing Psychic Scream seems a lot more feasible. So fuck it, let's throw it on the board and have the priest follow each trap with their fear. We've now built a strategy where 3 separate scores of diminishing returns are being utilised every 30 seconds. By the time the fear ends, it's time to prepare the next stun. From this, the rest becomes intuitive. Where do our offensive cooldowns go? Well, these setups are already our pressure points, and our nice 1 and 2 minute cooldowns slot perfectly into this structure. We aren't expected to kill people outside of these windows, so why would I use wings between them? So we use our big damage tools during the crowd control. The CC dictates our entire game plan. But remember, we use Cupid because it's really scripted. The buttons tell you how often you should be using them. And this can be a weakness because while this setup absolutely body slams the healer, there is nothing available for the other 2 enemies. Lacking any defensive CC, any peels, Cupid's rigidity can also be its biggest weakness. If the 2 free enemies can disrupt you, they will. Stunning the hunter when they need to trap, death gripping the priest away, and so on. The strategy can entirely break down in the face of good peels. Rogue Mage Healer is an interesting counterexample because while it uses the same philosophies, it applies them very differently. Cupid is about taking an often awkward spell, Freezing Trap, and aiming to make it reliable. In doing so, creating a very structured and predictable playstyle. RMX, meanwhile, is incredibly flexible and doesn't have a singular way to play it. They can kill healers, they can shut out healers, they can do fancy trick shots. The good players can do all 3 in a single game. The most potent tool for RMX is Polymorph. In terms of power, it is similar to Freezing Trap. It is an incredibly powerful spell, but it is also unreliable, since enemies can simply interrupt it. This means that while there are theoretical perfect scripts that RMX can and do follow, they need to play the game in front of them, and not the game they'd rather be playing. And being more flexible allows them to make more interesting decisions. They can use their crowd control defensively between setups to slow the pace of the game down in their favour. take this clip, where as far as the RMP is concerned, the game is over. They have a win condition on the next setup and just need to execute on it. Zaryu barely does a point of damage in 20 seconds. He just focuses on using his control until the setup arrives and they can kill the hunter. So not every polymorph, not every kidney shot needs to be in service of killing the enemy. CC that stops you losing can be just as valuable. When it comes to peels, CC used defensively, it should not be used haphazardly. It's not about annoying the opponent, but knowingly and intentionally denying them ideal circumstances. Disarming a melee DPS during their cooldowns or to save your teammate is going to get you significantly more value out of them than just using the ability on cooldown. Let's say we're putting an RMX against our Cupid. The Cupid has this crazy scripted strategy we wrote, but the rogue mage has a toolkit that can counter it. By interfering with the Cupid's setup, they're seeking to take away the Cupid's strongest asset and reduce the danger posed by the enemy. Through CC, they are slowing the tempo of the game, and when the time is right, they can speed it up again by performing an offensive setup of their own, supplemented by offensive cooldowns. Other compositions can take this idea even further and center their entire strategy around shutting down an enemy team. If you look at this clip of Cloud9 as Mage Lock, the CC they are able to put out is crazy. With Polymorph and Fear, two spammable crowd controls on separate DRs, they can completely shut down an opposition team. They can disrupt the setups, but they can also just keep the players constantly stuck in a Fear or Polymorph. They can essentially remove a player from most of the match and leave teams feeling helpless. This gives them the freedom to do damage, and they'll have a few scripted setups, but Mage Lock thrives on this defensive play that takes advantage of attrition, dampening, and seeking opportunities.
At all times, not only denying the drinks, but also taking so much damage.
Oh my! Multi-man solos Garakian!
More control does not make these comps objectively superior, but these extra tools tend to give the classes and compositions a higher skill cap that the best players are able to take advantage of. For contrast, my pick for the DPS pairing with the worst CC toolkit would be Arms Warrior and Windwalker Monk. You've got limited CC on a long cooldown, so you have very little offensive control, and if you're using Fear and Paralysis offensively, you have nothing meaningful to peel with. So you are almost by necessity pushed towards rushing down healers and hoping for the best. And if the two classes are strong in the meta, then it could work, but it's unlikely to ever truly be a successful comp because it just lacks tools. Although I see a couple of tools right here, am I right? So now I've taught you the basics, now figure the rest out for yourself. Now get out. We've been poisoned. Must have been the monster. Pepe. Listen, we just need to ride this out. We just need to stay focused, stay conscious, and we can get through this. Let's just keep focusing intently on crowd control. Context doesn't matter. We just need to stay awake and stick with this. Hey, do you want to see a crazy clip?
The first loss was kind of our mistake, not anything of them doing well. We just fucked up individually. Oh shit. Yeah, we just fucked up individually and that's it.
And what's wild is that guy made it to BlizzCon that year. And this clip perfectly demonstrates the value of defensive CC.
15 seconds away, 16 seconds away from CMD's ice block. Can they push for it? Ironbark, when he gets caught on a polymorph, the Ironbark may not matter. 10 seconds away, 8 seconds away for it. Can they gun down for the kill? Cauterize about to trigger. 4 seconds away, 3 seconds away, 2 seconds, 1 second.
Oh my goodness! Oh my god!
Athena Jones, they might be able to reverse it. A miracle for Unitas White. CMD.
So on match point, CMD manages to stall out his ice block cooldown and lands it at 1%? What would you call that? We'll call it 1%. Venruki calls it a miracle, but that doesn't happen by chance, mate. Look at the CC lead up to the block. Disarm and Frostnova are overlapped, and CMD makes the ballsy play of casting a polymorph in the rogue's face as Cauterize is triggering. It's a solid few seconds, but because this block is so close, pretty much every bit of damage reduction in the lead up to this moment contributed to CMD surviving, right? The last time CMD is at full health before that block is over 80 seconds beforehand, so in that time every Fear, every stun, every polymorph contributed to him living. If he takes 1% more damage in that 80 seconds, he dies. The defensive play from Yosk in this game was what you would expect from a BlizzCon competitor. Throughout the entire game, he is interfering with the opposition's setups. A key moment is when he shuts down the RM Pal smoke bomb with Intimidating Shout and Stormbolt. This is an overtly defensive Fear. As we spoke about earlier, this is about preventing the enemy from dealing damage to keep CMD alive. But CMD seizes the opportunity to take an offensive polymorph. And what starts out as a full health Aiden looking to score a kill, turns into his healer committing both Blessing of Sacrifice and Divine Shield, the healer's two biggest cooldowns. It's a huge play that would have otherwise have seen CMD die, but instead nets them a huge win. Now the trouble here is that they lost that game. Hey, stay focused. You want to see a cool clip of Zaryu polymorphing a Feral Druid?
No. I said a beat it, so lucky.
Okay. I DV shoot the Feral. Shoot Feral.
Okay. He's top.
It's very fast, so let's go through it again. Zaryu casts Frost Nova to root the Feral Druid. Anyone who has seen a Feral Druid knows they shrug off all slows and all roots. They do this by power shifting, quickly leaving and re-entering a form to clear any movement impairments. This becomes a reflex for most druids. If your character is slowed or rooted, you just reflexively power shift to remove it. Zaryu's technique here plays into that behaviour. He roots the druid and immediately uses Dragon's Breath. During that global, the druid has already left cat form to clear the root, but has not had time to get back into cat form when the breath lands. Now disoriented for 4 seconds in cast form, there is nothing to stop him from being polymorphed, and Zaryu lands it. See, that's pretty cool. Oh, I thought that would last longer. Okay, let's move on. Blind. Blind is widely considered to be the most powerful CC in the game, and that's not wrong, but it can be deceptive. Like, you know, you look at it and it looks kind of mundane, right? Like, compared to what we've already spoken about. But if we look at this chart again, we can see that Blind is a disorient, and the longest duration CC tends to be Incapacitates. It's easily the strongest CC on the disorient category, but that's not where it gets its reputation from. If you have been blinded, odds are you're fighting a rogue, but I'm pretty sure that this is just the poison. If you are fighting a rogue, that means Sap is in play, and Sap is a lot more interesting to talk about. Sap is an 8-second incapacitate with no cooldown. That description would make it the strongest crowd control in the game, but the rogue needs to be in stealth and the target needs to be out of combat. A surface level reading of this talent would limit it to the opening seconds. After all, players aren't going to stop fighting. The intended use for Sap back in 2004 would likely have been for it to only be used right before combat started, right? But even as far back as World of Roguecraft, we can see players taking advantage of Sap in a fight. Through tools like Vanish and Shadow Dance, rogues can access Sap without needing to manually drop combat, but they can do that as well. A character is no longer in combat if 6 seconds have elapsed since their last combat input, or their last time being hit by an ability that is deemed to put them in combat. So when it comes to CC that puts you in combat, it's a complete shit show. As with so many things, it's Cataclysm's fault, right? So at launch, the heroics expected you to use crowd control, but the playbase had forgotten how to use crowd control, so Blizzard hasted, okay, too far off topic, stay focused. The logic is that these spells are the crowd control effects that you are expected to use before a big pull in PvE, so that's why Warlock's Sphere does not trigger combat, but a Priest's Psychic Scream does. But even that doesn't make sense, because Blinding Light is also an AoE 6-second disorient, and it doesn't put you in Okay, let's say you look into Sap a healer, and we're ignoring composition and logic, we're just trying to use the tools we have available to land a Sap. How do we go about it? So if you want to Sap someone, the Incapacitate category is overflowing with options. Polymorph's a really obvious one that you can find plenty of examples of. More obscure options are possible, like you could hypothetically pair Cheap Shot with Paralysis to create a 7-second CC chain, also for a half Sap. But all of these will result in a DR'd Sap, so if we want a full Sap, we're going to have to turn to the Disorient category, where pickings are far slimmer. Abilities like Psychic Scream, Cyclone, and Intimidating Shout trigger combat but have a 6-second duration, so maybe they're viable candidates? Because the CC chain precisely matches our time, the target will logically regain combat at the precise moment you are able to sap them. This means that a savvy player could immediately put themselves back in combat and deny you the sap. So success comes down to shenanigans with latency. Both players are going to try to make an input at the exact same time, and the servers will decide who wins, which isn't the most reliable basis for a fucking strategy.
Okay. I can try to sap.
Should die.
Got it.
Fear has its own drawbacks, but one benefit is that it doesn't trigger combat, so the 6-second timer will be based on the last relevant input. This would give the rogue fractions of a second more to land the sap. We can see an example of this concept in this clip of Oxygen being sapped off blind despite playing Relentless. People play Relentless to reduce blind down to 6 seconds and thus give themselves an opportunity to avoid sap. But in this clip, Oxygen gets blinded on a regrowth cast. The blind didn't trigger combat, the regrowth cast wasn't finished, so the combat timer was based on the last successful global before the regrowth, and that gave the rogue the window to sap. So we can ironically see why blind is so powerful. It's instant cast, clears dots, does not trigger combat, and DRs separately to sap, and the whole package belongs to one player, so it doesn't require any synergy like Freezing Trap can. Blind enables the rogue to comfortably pull off a 16-second CC chain every 2 minutes, and this combo can be plugged into the more loose setups we spoke about, giving them a reliable and devastating chain. And that is why the decision to trigger blind is all but universal. If you sit blind, it will be scrutinized. Oh, do you feel that? It's getting worse. Okay, stay with me, you're gonna be okay. Let me let you in on a secret. I was gonna say this for myself, but I've discovered the most powerful spec. 9.0. Moonkins now have access to every category of diminishing return. They're going to be insane. You know, disarm, disorient, incapacitate, stun, silence, knockback, root. They have it all. They're going to be insane. Assuming they do good damage and can survive, and their healers also do good damage and survive. But, you know, Cyclone, so powerful. When you first read the tooltip for Cyclone, it sounds good, but also kind of bad. It grants full invulnerability, so while it is crowd control like Polymorph or Fear, it somehow feels like it's offering some protection almost. It puts the target into a kind of stasis. You know, Cyclone on the kill target can be really frustrating, right? And if done carelessly, can be really harmful. But if done knowingly, with intent, it can be so effective. You know, think back to what we were talking about earlier, the ebb and flow of momentum. You don't always need to be doing damage to a kill target in order to score a kill. Cyclone on the kill target is essentially another form of crowd control on the healer. You are preventing them from doing their job. It's a form of soft CC, like Shadowy Duel and Smoke Bomb. Different, but no less effective. The power of Cyclone is made all too clear in this BlizzCon 2019 series between Cloud9 and the Gosu crew. The Gosu crew had played a brilliant series to bring it to Game 5, but got utterly dismantled by Cloud9 as Rogue Mage Druid, and it was Cubsy's Cyclones that made the difference. The Cyclones are swapped between the Monk and the Druid, and Snuts are swapping accordingly. Between the Cyclones and the kidney shots and the threat of interrupts, Goraki isn't given the time to recover from the pressure he's under. The highest health the Monk has in the last minute of the game is about 60% health, and the Druid's about 70%. The Monk could die, but the main purpose for damaging him is to keep drawing the globals of the Druid and maybe catch the Monk low enough to snipe a kill, which is what this kidney and bash was. By cycloning the kill target, Goraki is denied the time he needs to recover from the setups. He's put into a time machine and sent forward 6 seconds until the next kidney shot, while his teammate is in worse shape and is now cycloned himself. Other variants of this idea include cycloning the target on big defensive cooldowns like Blessing of Sacrifice. Blessing of Sac is essentially a one-way cyclone, right? So by cycloning a Sac, you deny the healer the entire purpose of their cooldown. Or take this clip of me against a Moonkin, where a triple cyclone denies me a good portion of my wings, but also the healer's divine shield. He is immune to CC for those precious seconds, but can't do anything meaningful with it due to the clone. Due to the limited range of Cyclone, it generally encourages Resto Druids to take very aggressive positioning, and it requires the Druid team to already have momentum. Like, Goreki can't match Cubsy's Cyclones right now because he's hanging on for dear life. Because it is so aggressive, it's possible to punish this kind of Cyclone play. It can lead to a sort of complacency where there is so little pressure that the Druid forgets to set up HOTS. That gives you an easy opportunity to flip the pressure if the Druid is over-aggressive and underprepared. But, not in this game. I was fucked from end to end. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a bit better. Head feels clearer. Here, let's test you. By this point, you should be able to understand the rationale behind decision making with crowd control in Arena. So I'm going to show you this clip, and we're going to see if you can follow it. Take a look.
I got a pie.
Go. I can blind you.
Yeah. Should. Oh, CR.
It's on DR.
Okay. You get next.
No, I can't. Tentacle. Conscription.
Okay.
I can blind whenever.
Casting fine. Yeah, probably.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah, wait for Kenny.
Yeah, wait for Kenny.
Wait, he has no pet sec. I have to bust. It's over.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
We gotta wait. I could die. Go, one piece. Got it.
Yeah.
Running in.
Can bust.
Step Kenny. Oh, he's so fucking dead. Just gone.
Yeah.
Right? He left.
I was like, how do you get the full, man?
Yeah, I was like, no.
I was like, what?
So why did they think they were going to win, only to settle down and win not long after? What prevented them from winning at the beginning of the clip? You good? Good. Then we can stop talking about this arena shit and get serious. Well, I've got the antibodies now. But listen, Shadowlands has raised so many questions, like reasonable questions, and it's all coming out like a house of cards. And I just had this gut feeling that Pepe's at the center of it. And Pepe's alleged creator, Jordan Powers, he knows more than he's letting on. And he has a Twitter. So I go to his Twitter, and what do I find out? His goddamn DMs are closed. So I add him, and I say, Jordan, I gotta talk to you about Pepe. And no response. Jordan Powers, the man does not exist. The man tweets like a goddamn robot. I can't say that. Let's go again.